My name is Mark, a 60-year-old widower living in suburban Chicago. I've got a story to share, a tale of family betrayal and a search for justice. It all began when my son, Brian, married Vanessa. After losing my wife years ago, I had hoped that welcoming Vanessa into our small family would bring some much-needed joy back into our lives. I still remember their first visit after their honeymoon. I spent hours preparing my famous pot roast, eager to impress my new daughter-in-law. When they arrived, Brian smiled and said, "This smells amazing, Dad." Vanessa, however, wore a tight-lipped smile and added, "Yes, it's quaint." I brushed off her comment, assuming she was just nervous. "Well, I hope you both brought your appetites," I said, trying to keep the mood light. But as we ate, I couldn't ignore how Brian kept glancing at Vanessa before he spoke. It was subtle, but it was there. Trying to make conversation, I turned to Vanessa. "So Brian tells me you work in marketing. How's that going?" "It's fine," she replied curtly. Then she turned to Brian. "Honey, don't you think you've had enough bread?" I watched as Brian's hand paused midway to the bread basket, and he sheepishly put it down. That was when I first noticed something was off. My son, who'd always been confident and outgoing, seemed subdued. Over the next few weeks, I invited them over regularly, hoping to strengthen our bond as a family. But each time, Brian seemed quieter, more withdrawn. Whenever I tried to talk to him alone, he'd wave off my concerns. "Everything's fine, Dad. Just adjusting to married life, you know." But I didn't know. This didn't seem like normal adjusting. One evening, as I was cleaning up after dinner, I overheard them arguing in the living room. "You need to stop spending so much time with your dad," Vanessa hissed. "It's pathetic how clingy you are." "But he's my father, Vanessa. He's just trying to." "I don't care what he's trying to do. We're married now. Your priority should be me, not him." A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't right, but I didn't want to meddle in their marriage. Around this time, I started experiencing strange stomach issues after our family dinners. At first, I dismissed it as just a part of getting older. Little did I know that these symptoms were only the beginning of something far more sinister. Determined to get to the bottom of things, I invited them over for dinner again. As I set the table, Brian and Vanessa arrived, tension hanging in the air like a storm cloud. "Hey, Dad," Brian greeted me, his voice barely above a whisper. Vanessa forced a bright smile. "Hello, Mark. What's for dinner?" "Lasagna," I replied, watching her reaction closely. An old family recipe. Throughout the meal, Vanessa kept checking her phone, barely touching her food. Brian, on the other hand, glanced nervously at her every few minutes. Midway through dinner, I excused myself. "Just need to use the bathroom. Don't mind me." As I walked back, I passed by the kitchen and froze. There was Vanessa, hunched over my plate, sprinkling something into my food. My heart raced as I quickly ducked out of sight. "What are you doing?" I heard Brian whisper harshly. "Shut up," Vanessa snapped. "He'll hear you." I took a deep breath and composed myself before returning to the dining room, pretending as if nothing had happened. My mind was spinning. What had she put in my food? Was this the reason I'd been feeling sick? Acting as naturally as I could, I sat back down, and when Vanessa turned to berate Brian about something, I quickly swapped our plates. "Everything okay, Mark?" Vanessa asked, her eyes narrowing suspiciously. "Never better," I replied, forcing a smile. As we continued eating, I kept a close eye on Vanessa. Within minutes, she began shifting uncomfortably in her seat, eventually excusing herself to the bathroom multiple times, looking increasingly distressed. That's when it hit me. Laxatives. She had been putting laxatives in my food. After they left, I confronted Brian. "Son, we need to talk." "What's going on with Vanessa?" Brian broke down, his face crumpling. "Dad, I don't know what to do. She's not the person I thought she was." "Has she been putting something in my food?" I asked directly. He looked away, his voice barely audible. "I'm so sorry, Dad. She said it was just a joke at first, but then she kept doing it. She wanted to keep you away, to make you stop inviting us over." A mix of anger and heartbreak washed over me. "Why didn't you stop her, Brian? Why didn't you tell me?" "She threatened to leave me," he admitted, tears streaming down his face. "She's isolated me from all my friends. I don't have anyone left." I put my hand on Brian's shoulder, trying to offer some comfort. "You have me, son. You'll always have me. As Brian left that night, I knew I had a decision to make. Confronting Vanessa directly wouldn't work. She was too manipulative. No, I needed a plan. I needed evidence. That night, I made some calls to old friends. It was time to fight back, but I had to be smart about it. Vanessa had no idea what was coming her way. The next morning, I woke up with newfound determination. I wasn't going to let Vanessa destroy my family or my health. I called my old buddy, Mike, who works in security. Mike, I need some surveillance equipment, the kind that's hard to spot. Everything okay, Mark? He asked, a note of concern in his voice. Not really, but it will be. I'll explain later. Within a day, my house was rigged with hidden cameras in the living room, kitchen, even the guest bathroom. If Vanessa was up to no good, I'd catch her red-handed. It didn't take long for the evidence to start piling up. At the very next dinner, I reviewed the footage and saw Vanessa sneaking into the kitchen, pulling a small bottle from her purse and sprinkling its contents into my food. Got you, I muttered, but I knew this was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I witnessed a pattern of behavior that made my blood boil. Vanessa wasn't just tampering with my food, she was systematically trying to break Brian down, piece by piece. One evening, I caught her rifling through my medicine cabinet, pocketing several of my prescriptions. Another time, she was on the phone in her living room, thinking she was alone. I'm telling you, Susan, it's only a matter of time before the old man kicks the bucket. Then we'll have access to all his money. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to confront her then and there. But I knew I needed more. The worst part was seeing how she treated Brian when she thought no one was watching. The verbal abuse was relentless. You're pathetic, you know that? She spat at him one day. Can't even stand up to your dad. If you were half the man he is, maybe I wouldn't have to do all this. Brian's voice came out broken, barely a whisper. I'm trying, Vanessa. I just don't want to hurt him. Hurt him? She scoffed. Please, he's hurting us by not dying fast enough. While gathering evidence, I reached out to Brian's old friends, trying to restore the support network she had torn apart. I called his college roommate Jack. Hey Jack, it's Mark, Brian's dad. Have you talked to Brian lately? No, sir. He kind of dropped off the radar after he got married. Is everything okay? I sighed. Not really. I think he could use his friends right now. Would you mind giving him a call? One by one, I reached out to people from Brian's past, friends, cousins, old colleagues, slowly rebuilding the support he'd lost. I also spoke with my lawyer friend, Sarah. Sarah, I need your advice and discretion, I said, showing her the footage. I watched as her expression grew more serious with each clip. Mark, this is serious. We're looking at multiple criminal charges. Attempted poisoning, theft of prescription medication, elder abuse, not to mention the emotional abuse toward Brian. What should I do? I asked. Keep gathering evidence. Document everything. We need to build an airtight case. As the weeks passed, Vanessa grew more frustrated. Her schemes weren't having the effect she wanted, and I made sure to play along, even faking stomach issues now and then to keep her off the scent. But her frustration led to escalation. One evening, she cornered me in the kitchen. Listen here, old man, she hissed, jabbing a finger into my chest. I don't know what game you're playing, but it stops now. You're going to sign over your house to Brian, which means to me, or things are going to get very unpleasant for you. I stood my ground, meeting her cold gaze. Is that a threat, Vanessa? It's a promise, she snarled, shoving me hard enough that I stumbled against the counter. What she didn't realize was that every word, every action was being recorded. As she stormed out, I couldn't help but smile. The final piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. I picked up my phone and dialed Brian's number. Son, we need to talk. It's time to end this. The silent war was over. Now it was time for justice. The day of reckoning had finally come. I organized a family gathering, inviting everyone who mattered, relatives, old friends, and of course, Brian and Vanessa. As people started arriving, Vanessa's eyes darted around the room, her confusion palpable. What's going on? She hissed at Brian, her voice laced with suspicion. Why are all these people here? Brian, who I have finally managed to talk to privately, simply shrugged. Dad said he wanted to get everyone together. It's been a while. Once everyone had settled, I cleared my throat, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. Thank you all for coming. Before we catch up, there's something important I need to share. The room fell silent, the kind of silence that made every heartbeat feel amplified. Over the past few months, some troubling things have been happening in our family. I didn't want to believe it at first, but I have proof that can't be ignored. With that, I turned on the TV, playing the footage I painstakingly gathered. Vanessa's expression shifted from confusion to horror as the video showed her tampering with my food, stealing my medication, and verbally attacking Brian. Gasps echoed through the room, and I saw Brian's old friend Jack place a supportive hand on his shoulder. Vanessa's face had drained of color. That's not what it looks like," she stammered. "It's all a misunderstanding." But her words were swallowed by the footage, which continued to play, revealing the moment she physically threatened me in the kitchen. When it finally ended, the silence was deafening. My sister was the first to break it. She stood up, her voice trembling with rage. "How dare you?" she spat at Vanessa. "How could you do this to my brother? To Brian?" Vanessa's eyes darted around, desperate for an ally. Finding none, she turned to Brian. "Brian," she pleaded, her voice shaking. "Tell them it's not true. Tell them I'd never do this." All eyes shifted to Brian. I held my breath, praying he'd find the strength to speak the truth. Slowly he rose to his feet, his voice unsteady but gaining resolve with every word. "No, Vanessa, I can't lie anymore. What Dad showed, it's all true. And there's more that wasn't even caught on camera. The way you've treated me, isolated me, I'm done. I want a divorce." The room erupted in a mix of shock and murmurs of support. Vanessa's face twisted in fury. "You can't do this to me," she screeched, lunging at Brian, but Jack and another friend quickly stepped between them. "I think it's time for you to leave," Jack said firmly. As Vanessa was escorted out, hurling insults and threats, I turned to Sarah, my lawyer friend, who nodded and quietly slipped out to make some calls. The next few hours were a blur of tearful apologies, hugs, and promises to stay in touch. Brian was surrounded by friends he hadn't seen in years, their support visible in every pat on the back and encouraging word. Later that evening, as the gathering wound down, Brian and I sat together on the porch. The cool night air was a welcome relief from the intensity of the day. "I'm so sorry, Dad," Brian said, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have seen it sooner, should have said something." I put my arm around him, squeezing his shoulder gently. "You have nothing to be sorry for, son." She manipulated both of us. What matters is that it's over now. In the weeks that followed, justice began to unfold. Vanessa was charged with attempted poisoning, elder abuse, and domestic violence. Her professional life crumbled as news of her actions spread, leading to her losing her job and her reputation. I supported Brian through the divorce process. It wasn't easy, but with each passing day, I saw more of the son I knew returning. As for me, I decided to channel the experience into something positive. I became an advocate for elder abuse awareness, using my story to help others recognize and escape toxic relationships. Months later, Brian and I sat side by side, happier and healthier than we'd been in years. "Hey Dad," Brian said, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Heard any news about Vanessa lately?" I chuckled. "As a matter of fact, I have. Seen she's facing bankruptcy and possible jail time. Karma's a funny thing, isn't it?" We shared a knowing look, silently acknowledging how far we'd come. The nightmare was over, and we had emerged stronger because of it. We had been through hell, but we made it out the other side. And now, finally, we could start healing. The story may be over, but I have a question for you. If you were in Brian's shoes, how long would you have tolerated Vanessa's abuse before speaking up? At what point do you think loyalty to a spouse should be outweighed by self-preservation and family bonds? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experiences and opinions could help someone else who might be going through something similar. And if you found this story engaging, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support helps us continue sharing these important stories.